School teacher Rebecca Friedrichs has challenged her union in a lawsuit that could rewrite labor laws across the country. How will the U.S. Supreme Court decide her case, especially after the death of Justice Antonin Scalia? We hear from Friedrichs, from the union president, and from an education watchdog. Next on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by 5 Point. 5 Point is an independent real estate development company with assets under management across California. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming. Hi, I'm Rick Reiff. Welcome to Inside OC. Rebecca Friedrichs is an Orange County school teacher. She's also the lead plaintiff in a lawsuit that could have a profound impact on the state's powerful teachers union and on the entire system of collective bargaining for public employees. Friedrichs and 9 other teachers say they shouldn't be forced to pay fees to the California Teachers Association for negotiating on their behalf. The case has gone all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, which has heard the arguments and will make a decision soon. We'll hear later from the president of the CTA and from an education watchdog. But first, joining me, the school teacher in the middle of it all, Rebecca Friedrichs. Rebecca, thanks for being on.
Hi, thanks for inviting me.
And I want to thank your kids, you students at Holder Elementary. Thank you for letting your teacher out of the classroom to be here for the interview. So Holder Elementary, tell me a little bit about, what grades do you teach and what school and all that?
Well, I've been in Savannah School District for 28 years, most of those years at Holder Elementary, which is in Buena Park. And I've taught kindergarten, first, second, third, and fourth. I just go wherever they need me.
Okay.
I enjoy them all.
Sometimes I see it say Buena Park, sometimes Anaheim. What's that about?
Our district, Savannah, is in Anaheim. We service 4 cities. Buena Park is one of them.
Okay, and didn't you say like the playgrounds, half the schools in Buena Park and half the schools in Anaheim?
Yes, the buildings in Buena Park, the playgrounds in Anaheim, and across the street is Cypress.
Okay. Hence all the confusion.
That's right.
Before we get into how you got involved in this suit and everything, I referenced the death of Justice Scalia. This is one of those cases that the Supreme Court was about to rule on where the thinking was Scalia would provide the 5th vote and that you look like you were going to win this case. It was going to overturn 40 years of labor law and that type of thing. Now with his death, it looks like all bets are off. What kind of an emotional roller coaster has it been?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, we're devastated for Justice Scalia's family. I just can't imagine to suddenly lose someone you love so much, and devastated for the country. He was a very good man. For us personally, yes, it's been a bit of a roller coaster. He was considered our swing vote. We didn't have any guarantee that he would think anything positively about us. We still did not have a guarantee, and we weren't feeling that way at all. We felt good, but we didn't feel there was a guarantee. We still feel that our case is very strong. We argued very well, and we are willing to re-argue our case if necessary. We believe we have a strong case either way.
Okay, and of course the conventional wisdom is now it will be 4-4, which means existing law stands. When you say you're going to continue to pursue this,
sure.
Get a rehearing on this?
Sure, there is an opportunity. We may be able to re-argue the case when a new justice is appointed to the court, and we feel like our argument is very good. We can go before any 9 justices and argue our case. We'd be happy to do that.
So how does a teacher at Holder Elementary School wind up as the lead plaintiff on a case before the Supreme Court?
Yeah, that only happens in America, right? What an amazing country. I spend my days on the floor with little kids, and was able to have the honor of being inside the United States Supreme Court, listening to a court with my name on it. That's pretty remarkable. Really, the way it happened was I did everything that I knew how to do to try to make my voice heard within my union, and my voice wasn't heard. And not only my voice, but I was representing my colleagues as a union representative and on the executive board of my local union. And even there, I could not make the voice of my colleagues heard. Any of us who didn't walk lockstep with the union's opinions in collective bargaining or politics really were shunned and shut down. And I tried everything. I tried going through my school board, through my administration, and I always ran into this wall of a union I'm forced to pay that refused to hear my voice. So that's how I ended up
you
here.
don't. Let's talk. You don't have to pay for their political advocacy. So just explain a teacher. What's the average pay for a grade school teacher?
Sure. It depends on how long you've taught. The union has set up a system of pay where it's based on your years of service and your number of units you have from the university. So it's not a merit pay system.
Right.
So it really depends on how long you've been there. I can't speak for every school district. They're all different, but average, teachers in Orange County are making somewhere from $40,000 to some over $100,000 a year. And so your dues are, everyone pays the same dues, so they run about 1% to 2% of your pay.
Okay, so if you're making 50,000, it's what does
About
that come out
2%
to?
of your pay.
All right,
In my district, the dues are a little over $1,000 a year,
Okay.
1,003, something like that.
All right, but now there's a percentage you don't have to pay, right? In other words, the union, the people who actually belong to the union, they're union members, they pay a little more, right? About how much more?
That's correct. And this is interesting because you cannot be a member unless you pay for the politics. So that's something that bothers a lot of us too. You don't have to pay for the overt politics, that's true. But when you make that constitutional choice of freedom not to pay for overt union politics, you lose your membership. So you become a non-member. Non-members are called agency fee payers. That's what I am.
Okay.
We get a rebate of about 30 to 35% of our dues. Each year it's different. It's based on numbers that the union comes up with, and they tell us what's chargeable and what's non-chargeable.
Now, one of the union arguments is you're benefiting from the fact they're representing you. They're negotiating for your wages, your working conditions. You should pay something for that.
Right. Well, I have to say that's their opinion, that it's a benefit. In my opinion, my strong opinion, and many, many teachers agree with me, their benefits aren't worth the moral costs. So I'll give you a couple examples. They fight for teacher tenure. I have seen with my own eyes my own students being impacted by teachers who have become quite negative and, in my opinion, abusive. I've witnessed a teacher when I was a student teacher who was grabbing children and screaming at children. Because of teacher tenure, along with collectively bargained grievance processes, the administration has an incredibly difficult time ridding themselves of these sorts of teachers. I don't think that's to my benefit or to my students' benefit to have those tenure processes that would protect someone like that who's actually harming children. So to me, that's immoral. I also struggle with, I get pay raises quite often. For a few years, we kept getting pay raises quite often. Then we had a lull in the economy. But oftentimes those pay raises come at the expense, in my opinion, at the expense of my students. I haven't had a teacher's aide in years in my classroom. I teach in an area where a lot of my students are needy, and they really could benefit from a teacher's aide in my classroom. I would rather make a little bit less so that a teacher's aide could be in every single classroom. So it's just things like that where I don't see their benefits the same way they see the benefits.
When you were in the union or trying to make a difference, what kind of, I'm sure you brought these things up to union people. What was their response?
Well, I'll tell you, can I tell you a specific example? Sure. When I was a union rep on the union executive board, I was serving as secretary. There were teachers within my district who were about to lose their jobs. And it was during the lull in the economy. I can't remember the year, 2008 or 9 maybe. And these teachers were outstanding. I had mentored 3 of them personally. One had been my student teacher. And their students loved them, the parents loved them, the district loved them. They were doing a good job. They deserved to continue working. Well, we were told there wasn't enough money to rehire them and they were going to be pink slipped. So I spoke to my colleagues, whom I was supposedly representing as their union rep, and many of them said, we'd like to take a small cut in pay to save their jobs. They're our friends. We want to do what's right for the kids in our community. Our community's taking cuts in pay. Our community's losing jobs. So I took that to my union board and I received an absolute no. Won't talk about it, won't consider it. So I kept nagging on the issue, and I was finally told, Rebecca, don't worry about those teachers. We're going to give them a seminar on how to receive unemployment benefits. And at that point, I was just shocked. And I said, these teachers pay $1,000 a year for your representation, and you're going to allow them to lose their jobs and teach them how to get benefits. They don't want to be unemployed. They want to teach, and their students and parents deserve to have them in the classroom. The least we could have done was taken a vote to see how everyone felt on that issue.
So what's been the reaction from fellow teachers to your the advocacy for this lawsuit?
That's been the most surprising and positive part of this experience. When I took this on, I knew full well I could be bullied and shunned and treated with disdain. And I've had the exact opposite experience. There are a few who aren't very nice. And for the most part, I'd say 95% of my experience has been positive. Teachers that take me into a very quiet place and thank me, hug me. Thank you for doing what I'm too afraid to do. Thank you for standing up for us. Thank you for doing what's right for our kids and our students. They're afraid. They're afraid to speak out because they've been bullied by a union they're forced to support. And they're grateful. So for the most part, it's been really positive.
Any negative things, nasty phone calls, stuff like that?
I've received some nasty emails, some from total strangers. And, I read hurtful things in articles and things like that. But like I said, for the most part, it's been the general public and teachers themselves have been very supportive.
There's the argument that the union protects teachers. First of all, they ensure that you're making a decent wage, you're professionals, and that it will attract better people to the profession. And it protects you from arbitrary decisions by administrators and things like that. You can't just be fired willy-nilly.
Right. Well, like I said before, that's how they feel, and they're entitled to their opinion on that. I believe that at the turn of the last century, unions did do a lot of wonderful things. I think they have a very great history. And I do think that they led to a lot of those wonderful labor laws that we have now, and I appreciate that. But I believe the unions have become what they used to fight. They have become very powerful, very entrenched, and they're really fighting more for what the union leadership wants, not so much what the rank and file who are paying the bill want. So as far as they would protect my job and things like that, you mentioned pay and benefits, and you mentioned bringing people into the teaching profession. Well, actually, I think merit pay would probably bring us some outstanding people from the business science world if we could offer them that. So there's a debate going on, and this is a very important topic. There are children at stake here, so I just disagree.
Okay. And finally, optimist or pessimist about the long-term future of public education?
Oh, well, I am an optimist. And I believe if those of us who love children and really want what's right for children, not what's right for the adults, what's right for children, put the children first, work together to bring the children the best education possible, absolutely, I think.
Okay.
Things
Rebecca, thanks so much for taking the time
Rick.
out of class. You can go back to Holder Elementary now. Okay. All righty. Well, now also, we have in this case, lots of folks have weighed in with the Supreme Court for and against Rebecca's lawsuit. In fact, some 6 legal briefs were filed by governments, unions, teachers, parents, think tanks, and others at issue whether the High Court should reverse a nearly 40-year precedent that requires public employees to pay dues to the union whether they want to or not. Now, here's what a couple of opponents of the lawsuit have said. The California Attorney General says, quote, "This court should not disturb the settled law that has long permitted individual states to adopt and refine the specific structures they determine are best suited to their own public workplaces." The U.S. government weighed in with a very similar brief. And in addition, 16 public school teachers filed a brief that says, in part, quote, "By allowing effective collective bargaining, the state of California allows unionized teachers to be advocates for children in public education, since issues of importance to public school teachers necessarily overlap with the good of children." And here's a comment from a group supporting the Friedrichs lawsuit. 17 education reform advocates say public education unions inevitably seek collective bargaining agreement terms that shield ineffective teachers from correction, remediation, or dismissal. And now, to continue the discussion, joining me, the president of the California Teachers Association, Eric Heins. Also joining me, president of the California Teachers Empowerment Network, Larry Sand. Gentlemen, thanks to both of you for coming on.
Thank
you.
you.
Eric, I thanked Rebecca for taking the time out. I want to thank you for flying all the way from your headquarters in the Bay Area to be here today. Also under some trying circumstances, hard to see, from behind the desk, but you're in a sling.
Yes, yeah, I dislocated my shoulder 2 days ago, so I'm...
Well, thank you for coming, especially under those. It couldn't have been a real comfortable flight for you. So I do appreciate it. You just heard Rebecca Friedrichs, some devastating comments about her experience as a teacher dealing with unions. I'm sure you'd like to make some comments about that interview.
Well, sure. I mean, first I'd like to start by saying, when we talk about teachers versus the unions, there's really no such thing. I'm a teacher. I'm elected to be the president of CTA, but after I'm done being president, I go right back to my classroom, the same way any teacher does. I pay dues like any member does. We represent about 325,000 educators across the state, teachers and bus drivers and other educational employees, paraprofessionals and all of that. And when you have that many people together, you have at least that many opinions. And it's we use a very democratic process to get those opinions heard. I imagine it must be really hard when you're in the minority, when you're presenting a minority view, to feel like you're not being heard. But in fact, not being heard is not the same thing as not being able to convince a majority of the other members to go along with what you believe is the right thing.
Yeah. What would be the impact to the CTA if you just said, look, Rebecca, teachers like you're in the minority. You don't have to belong to us. We're not going to collect your dues, and you're done with it. What would be the downside of that?
Well, they already have that right. I mean, no one is forced to join a union. That's been federal law for many years.
They have to pay the agency fee.
Sure, that what they pay for though is the benefits from the collective bargaining. So, for example, for Rebecca Friedrichs to take the time to come here during a work day, that's a right for her not to be. Her administrator may not like her being gone, and if she didn't have the protection she did, which are bargained under the contract and state law, she could easily go back and find herself fired, and nobody there to protect her because maybe the principal is trying to get rid of her. I don't know. But as a hypothetical, there's lots of different things. For example, salary increases. I'm glad that maybe Ms. Friedrichs doesn't need the salary increases to pay the rents and mortgages in Orange County, but I know what the living standards are around here, and what teacher salaries are certainly not enough to support whole families and do those kinds of things, and pay the rent, the groceries, and all those other kinds of things that need to happen. But it's also my understanding that the way I heard is that the district that she worked for did take furlough days during the Great Recession, as many districts did, where teachers took shorter work years, which resulted in pay cuts for many of them to save jobs, to do many other things that they needed during the Great Recession we're just now beginning to recover from.
Underlying the Friedrichs argument, and I'm sure we're going to hear in just a moment from Larry, is this idea that the interests of the teachers' union is not the same as the interest of the kids. Do you accept that?
Oh, not at all. I think in fact, it's very hard to separate that from one from the other. Even if we're talking about basic union things like better salaries, working conditions, smaller class sizes, those kinds of things all fall under bargaining. All those kinds of things, job shares, all those kinds of protections, those really help create better learning conditions for the students. I was teaching second grade when we got 20-1 rather than 32-1, which I had the year before. It made a great difference in my teaching and how I was able to help each and every student. We also have programs where we partner with Stanford University, and we are training our own members to go out and do professional development, actually improve teaching. We have many projects where we're talking about improving teacher evaluation so that it focuses, instead of the got you, it focuses actually on improving instruction and actually helping teachers either who are struggling or moving in different
Larry, let's get you into this. You've been listening now to Rebecca, to Eric. Your thoughts?
Well, I have certain issues with what Eric is saying, but just overall, if the union is as good as you say it is and does all you say it is, why do you force people to pay up?
I mean, go ahead. You can.
Nobody is forced to pay. They get a benefit from the bargaining that the union is legally required to provide them. It's only fair that they pay for that service because, frankly, if Abood were to be overturned and the Supreme Court ruling went against us, they end up paying nothing, but the rest of our colleagues end up picking up the cost for that. The cost doesn't go down because they still get all the benefits and all that because we still have the legal responsibility to provide it.
It's the old free rider argument. Unfortunately, those people aren't free riders, they're forced riders. What if I don't want what you're offering? I don't want your collective bargaining. Now don't forget, this case is not about collective bargaining. Collective bargaining will go on. And the exclusive representation you talk about is because you want exclusive representation because you want money from every teacher. Why not become a members-only union? And that would get rid of the free rider problem. I don't want what you're selling. Fine, don't represent me.
Well, not just about what we want, it's what the government of California wants because the law that they're seeking to overturn Abood 40 years ago, it brought stability to the labor market. And one of the things that if you read in the briefs, that the state of California and in fact the Attorney General of the United States, who also argued on our behalf, is that it brought stability. They like having a strong partner across from the table so they can actually move. I mean, you can imagine 325,000 members all trying to bargain for themselves a salary and those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. All of these laws exist for a reason. There was a time when a teacher could get fired because the administrator wanted their cousin hired. There was a time when evaluations were so poor, and in fact, the case that Ms. Friedrichs mentioned about a teacher harming a student, well, that's, under current law, that teacher should be done, and an administrator should do their job to get rid of them.
I think one of the arguments is that things have gone so far. Let's talk about tenure, and I'll throw it to Larry and then let you respond. But what's the teacher tenure in California?
It's
2 years?
It's 2 years, and it really comes down to 16 months because in the middle of the second year, the principal has to decide. Teachers' unions don't like to call it tenure anymore. Now it's called due process. In my world, though, it's undue process. Just to show you how skewed the system is, there are about 300,000 teachers in California. Any given year, 10 tenured teachers out of 300,000 lose their job. Typically, about 8 of them are criminals. 2 teachers a year lose their job because they're incompetent. 2 tenured teachers out of 300,000. I'm sorry, there's something wrong with that.
That's a shocking number.
Well, I'd say it's also an incorrect number. Let's talk a little bit about what tenure is usually used as shorthand. Tenure actually doesn't exist in the K-12 school system. What exists, what due process is called, what that means is that if I've reached through my probationary period, at which time I could be fired at any time without any notice, without any due process at all, and usually not given a reason. If an administrator has done their job, that should be plenty of time for them to figure out whether that teacher is right for that position. But let's say later on a teacher is struggling after they've reached permanent status. That means that under current law, and we just worked with the legislature to streamline that law, so a teacher that's struggling, it takes now about 8 months to go from that kind of evaluation through a process of remediation until they can actually leave the classroom. And so what it basically says is that a permanent teacher gets a hearing in front of an impartial judge to make sure, and 2 of their peers who actually do their job. So if I'm teaching music, I get 2 music teachers who actually do my job along with an arbitrator to decide on whether I've actually done my job or not.
The union picked arbitrator, you mean? Are you talking about the administrative law judge?
Administrative law judge.
Yeah. The union picked administrative law judges and 2 teachers who are in the union. So it doesn't seem like this is a very fair trial.
Well, we're getting short on time. Larry, what's the outcome of this? Do you feel that, how is this case going to be decided this time around, and what will happen going forward?
Great question. Who knows? Because obviously, as we discussed in the first part of the show, Mr. Scalia is no longer with us, so anything can happen in the Supreme Court. I do know that CTA is preparing. CTA had a document called Not If, But When, preparing for this moment, so I suspect, and maybe Mr. Heins can verify this, that they know that this day is coming at some point.
if there's, of course, that could depend on who the next president of the United States
All right,
is.
yeah, we'll go, yeah, the Supreme Court justice, yeah, it could, if it's somebody to the right of center, we might get a more fair hearing. If it's, Mr. Sanders, lots of luck.
So I guess the flip side of what I asked Rebecca, you guys were preparing for a possible negative decision. Are you feeling pretty good about the fact that?
Well, the reason we're preparing is because this case is bigger than just Rebecca Friedrichs and those 9 teachers. If you look where the money is coming from to fund this case, the Center for Individual Responsibility or Individual Justice, that they're funded by groups like the Koch brothers, other anti-union groups, certainly have groups that have tied to racism. And that's where it's coming from, and that's where the attacks, and those attacks are going to continue coming because they've got a lot of money to attack us. So we know that's going to continue.
And you brought in the Koch brothers, and you get the last word, Eric. Thanks very much. Okay, that's it for now. Thanks to my guests, Rebecca Friedrichs, Eric Heins, and Larry Sand. You can watch this show and past shows by going to pbssocal.org or at rickreiff.com. You can also catch our shows in our post-show open mic chatter, and we may continue this Koch brothers thing on YouTube. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by 5 Point. 5 Point is an independent real estate development company with assets under management across California. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.